Ukraine's storm shadows just unleashed heaven's wrath on a Russian headquarters, and Putin's plans for Donetsk have been thrown into disarray. On July 1st, United 24 Media was among the first to provide the basic details about a devastating Ukrainian missile strike carried out in Donetsk. Much of the oblast, which has been a key focus for Putin since he launched his supposed special military operation, is struggling under Russian occupation. That makes it a key target for Ukraine. By hitting Donetsk hard, Ukraine creates the potential for counterattacks that could eventually lead to it reclaiming the territory it's lost. That's what happened overnight on June 30th to July 1st. According to United 24, Ukraine launched a devastating missile strike that caused explosions to shake Donetsk. The Russian news agency TASS claimed that Russia's air defenses in the region went into overdrive, attempting to shoot down the Storm Shadow missiles that Ukraine launched. They failed. Ukraine successfully hit a metallurgical facility in Donetsk that Russia has been using as a key headquarters as Putin launches a renewed summer offensive designed to take complete control over the oblast. And it wasn't just Donetsk that Ukraine targeted. Luhansk was also struck with missiles. That oblast, which has almost fallen under Russia's complete control, was hit hard enough to cause multiple fires. And again, Ukraine targeted a key military facility. Footage posted to Telegram shows the Ukrainian missiles dropping, along with commentary from those filming the scene. "Look, do you see it?" asks one of the people filming the scene. There it is," comes the reply. Then boom, the Ukrainian missile touches down, with the two Russians filming the scene speculating that Ukraine had just hit Vaush. That's the former Higher Military Aviation School of Navigators located in Luhansk. As smoke rose over both oblasts, the head of Ukraine's anti-disinformation center, Andriy Kovalenko, took to Telegram to laud his country's achievements. "Precise work against the Russians in temporarily occupied Donetsk," Kovalenko said. "It's very intense there." Later reports revealed the true scale of the damage Ukraine caused. And with those reports came big news. It wasn't just a key headquarters that Ukraine obliterated in Donetsk. One of Putin's most important commanders also lost his life in the Storm Shadow strike. UA Wire names that colonel as Ruslan Guryachkin, who leads Russia's 8th Combined Arms Army. Formed in 2017, the 8th Combined Arms Army was stationed in Russia's southern military district before Putin launched his invasion. It took part in the initial incursion and was intended to serve as a protective force for Russia once it had managed to take territory in Ukraine's east. It served that precise purpose when Ukraine launched a counteroffensive against Russia during the summer of 2023, with the 8th Combined Arms Army serving in Marinka to repel the Ukrainian attacks. Putin was clearly happy with what the group achieved. In August 2024, he signed a decree that granted the army the honorary title of Guards in recognition of what Russia saw as its bravery and heroism in Ukraine. UA Wire says that Guryachkin had dedicated his entire life to Russian military service. He started his career as a cadet before rising through the ranks to become a commander in Putin's forces. Now the 8th Combined Arms Army's commander is dead, and its Donetsk headquarters is ruined. It gets worse for Russia. According to the Telegram channel Supernova Plus, Ukraine hit the Donetsk base so hard with its storm shadows that it may be impossible for the 8th Combined Arms Army to recover. "The building is hit all the way to the basement," the channel declared. "The dead are being carried out in batches." Though these reports haven't been independently verified yet, according to the Kyiv Post, the suggestion here is that Russia may have just lost dozens of its soldiers alongside the commander who led those troops. This is huge. If Ukraine's strike was as effective as some are claiming, Putin's forces in Donetsk just experienced a massive blow that casts Putin's summer offensive in the oblast into doubt. We'll get back to that point later in the video. First, Russia has to respond to what Ukraine just pulled off in Donetsk. That response is far from what we're used to seeing from Russia. Typically, its defense ministry tries to downplay Ukrainian missile and drone strikes, often claiming that any damage caused was the result of debris falling after air defenses shot those projectiles out of the skies. Not this time. Russia is instead trying to claim that Ukraine used Storm Shadow missiles to kill civilians. That's according to the Kyiv Post, which reports on comments made by Denis Pushilin, who leads the so-called Donetsk People's Republic. Pushilin is backed by Russia, and he's one of the key figures leading the pro-Russian forces within Donetsk in their insurrection against Ukraine. Pushilin had this to say when posting about Ukraine's strike on Telegram. "One civilian in the Republic was killed, 3 more, including a teenager, were wounded. Just before 10 p.m., the enemy attacked the regional capital with long-range air-launched missiles. Unfortunately, there are casualties in the Voroshilovsky district. A woman was killed, a teenage boy and a man wounded to varying degrees of severity." Notice the complete lack of any mention of Ukraine taking out a Russian military headquarters in Donetsk. Instead, Pushilin is trying to frame Ukraine's Storm Shadow strike as a deliberate attempt to kill civilians, including women and children, rather than the precise military strike Ukraine says it was. Pushilin continues. A number of infrastructure facilities were damaged, the trade pavilions of the Sokol market, the central department store and the bank. A fire broke out at the site of the attack. The liquidation work is ongoing. More precise information will be available after its completion. That mention of a trade pavilion is interesting. UA Wire points out that the 8th Combined Arms Army headquarters was near the local shopping center. Has Pushilin accidentally revealed that Ukraine's strike hit its intended target here? Perhaps. The pro-Russian mouthpiece seems to have given the game away as he desperately tries to frame Ukraine's strike as one designed to target civilians. Pushilin concludes, stating, "In the central city district of Golovka, a young man born in 2006 was injured as a result of a kamikaze UAV attack. The wounded are receiving qualified medical care. One residential building was destroyed and 12 were damaged, as well as 7 civilian infrastructure facilities in the Kalininsky, a clinic, dormitory, 3 boiler houses, Nikitovsky, pharmacy, and Central City, a bank branch, districts of Golovka." In total, Pushilin claims, Ukraine carried out 26 strikes using long-range missiles and 155mm artillery guns. Most of those strikes targeted Donetsk, with a few being reserved for Luhansk. What we have here is a tale of two sides. Ukraine claims that it only struck military targets on June 30th and July 1st. It backs that claim with the evidence of the aftermath, which has led to the destruction of a Russian military headquarters and the death of a key commander. Russia has stayed quiet about both. Instead, it's acting as though Ukraine just assaulted residential, commercial, and financial centers in Donetsk in a purposeful attempt to kill civilians. That claim seems a little rich, coming out of a pro-Russian mouth. After all, Russia has a far larger track record of targeting civilians to the point where doing so can be seen as one of Putin's key strategies. According to Statista, Russia's attacks on Ukraine's cities have resulted in 13,341 civilian deaths between February 24, 2022 and May 31, 2025. Of those dead, 710 are children. Russia has also caused 32,744 civilian injuries during the same period, Statista says, with 2,076 of the wounded being children. As recently as June 30th, the United Nations reported that Russia's attacks on civilians have been increasing. It says that the period between December 1, 2024 and May 31, 2025 saw Russia kill 986 Ukrainian civilians and injure 4,807 more. That's a 37% increase in the civilian casualty rate inside Ukraine compared to the same period during the previous year. It's possible Ukraine's Storm Shadow strike on Donetsk may have killed civilians. If it did, it was unintentional. Ukraine aimed to strike military targets and it succeeded. What we saw in Donetsk was nothing like what Russia is doing with its drone and missile strikes on Ukraine's cities, regardless of what Pushilin and those like him might claim. Regardless, Ukraine just pulled off a devastating strike against Russia's forces. It rained missiles from the heavens and took out a key headquarters, and it used Storm Shadow missiles to do it. Storm Shadow, which is also called Scalp, is a long-range, air-launched cruise missile developed jointly between France and the UK. Both have provided these missiles to Ukraine, with both having also provided permission for Ukraine to use the missile on Russian territory. That's according to German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, who proclaimed in May, "There are no longer any restrictions on the range of weapons delivered to Ukraine, neither by the UK, France, nor us. There are no restrictions by the US either. Those restrictions didn't matter in the context of Ukraine's Donetsk strike, given that it's part of Ukraine. However, their lifting showcases that Ukraine has the ability to use Storm Shadow however it chooses in its battle against Putin's forces." That's what it did on June 30th and July 1st, and it did it to devastating effect. According to Army recognition, a single Storm Shadow missile weighs about 2,866 pounds and measures about 16.7 feet in length. Each missile has a turbojet propulsion system that's needed to push such a heavy weight around. Thanks to that system, some variations of the Storm Shadow can travel up to 350 miles, making them ideal for Ukraine to launch attacks from behind the front lines that target facilities in Russian-occupied territory. The missile uses a combination of GPS and an inertial navigation system, or INS, to reach its target. The former provides satellite-based positioning data, says Army recognition, with the INS using motion sensors to help the missile calculate its positioning and orientation relative to its target. Terminal guidance, which kicks in as the missile closes in on its target, involves the use of a preloaded digital map through which the Storm Shadow can confirm its pathway via terrain references and real-time data collected by an onboard radar altimeter. In short, Storm Shadow is very accurate. And thanks to this combination of systems, it's also resistant to the electronic jamming Russia might use to send it off course. However, the highlight of the whole package is the Storm Shadow's warhead. Named the Bomb Royal Ordnance Augmented Charge, or BROACH, the warhead is designed to specifically tackle hardened targets, or those that are buried deep underground. You may remember the claim from earlier that Ukraine's Donetsk strike managed to reach the Russian military headquarters right down to its basement. The Broach warhead is the reason why that can happen. It makes Storm Shadow capable of blowing through an entire building to bury itself deep into a basement before the missile detonates. Army recognition says that Broach uses a two-stage approach. In the first stage, a shaped pre-charge allows the missile to breach through the target, creating an opening in whatever the target's outer layer may be. Anything from standard walls to reinforced concrete is vulnerable to this penetrative first stage, with the goal being to punch a hole in the target before detonation occurs. With that hole punched, a follow-through bomb penetrates the target. That's the second stage. This 992-pound follow-through bomb explodes, causing massive damage. It's also hard for Russia to stop a Storm Shadow. The missile can travel at speeds of up to Mach 0.95, depending on its altitude. While that's not so fast that it's impossible to shoot down, it does mean that Ukraine can use Storm Shadow to exploit areas where Russia doesn't have adequate air defense systems. Russia's 8th Combined Arms Army just discovered that the hard way. And that brings us to what Ukraine's strike means moving forward. Before digging into the wider implications for Donetsk, it's worth reiterating that Ukraine also hit Luhansk during its June 30th and July 1st attacks. There was a big reason for this. Like Donetsk, Luhansk has a considerable pro-Russian population outside of the invading Russian forces. Among those pro-Russians is the head of the Luhansk People's Republic, Leonid Pasechnik. He made an interesting claim on June 30th, just before Ukraine launched its strike. Literally 2 days ago, a report was released that the territory of the Luhansk People's Republic has been completely liberated, 100%. That claim followed a suggestion from Putin back in March that Russia controlled 99% of Luhansk. Both of these claims were intended to be messages to Ukraine, with Putin using Pasechnik as a mouthpiece to communicate that Luhansk has fallen and there's nothing Ukraine can do about it. Ukraine responded to that message with one of its own. By firing missiles at Luhansk, Ukraine has let Russia know that it doesn't matter how much of Luhansk Putin's forces occupy. Even if it's true that the region is now 100% controlled by Russia, Ukraine won't stop fighting for it. If Ukraine's troops are pushed out, long-range missiles and drone strikes will continue to devastate Russia's forces to the point where Putin can't use Luhansk as a staging ground for deeper invasions into Ukraine's territory. Still, it was Donetsk that was Ukraine's main target. Its goal was simple: slow down Putin's push into Donetsk. On June 6th, the Institute for the Study of War, or ISW, released a report analyzing Russia's offensive campaign. It noted that Putin has started his summer offensive, much of which focuses on Russia claiming the full Donetsk region. That was confirmed on June 5th by Ukraine's Presidential Office Deputy Head Pavlo Palisa, who said that Russia was likely trying to seize all of Donetsk, along with Luhansk, by September 1, 2025, in addition to creating a buffer zone close to Sumy by the end of 2025. That claim was backed on June 28th, when CNN reported that Russia had amassed 110,000 troops near the Ukrainian city of Pokrovsk. Located just 12.4 miles away from the Donetsk administrative border, Pokrovsk is a vital Ukrainian hub. Several key roads converge into the city, allowing Ukraine to use Pokrovsk to keep its troops supplied as they fight to retain Donetsk. If Putin takes the city, he will destroy that logistical network and put his forces within touching distance of the border he needs to claim if he's to gain 100% control over Donetsk. With this massive troop buildup, Putin is sending clear signals of intent to Ukraine. Russia wants Donetsk. It wants the oblast both to reinforce Putin's ideological claims that Donetsk was always Russian and should become so, and because taking Donetsk brings Russia one step closer to taking the Donbas region. With the Donbas claimed, Russia could then push deeper into Ukraine, using both Donetsk and Luhansk as launching points for future attacks that bring Russia closer to Kyiv. Failing that, Putin gaining control over Donetsk would give him more leverage in future peace negotiations. He could argue that Ukraine should cede the territory because Russia already controls it, and if it doesn't, the war will continue. All of this brings us back to what Ukraine just achieved with its June 30th and July 1st strikes. By taking out the 8th Combined Arms Army headquarters and killing its commander, Ukraine has just destroyed one of Putin's key fighting forces in Donetsk. Russia can no longer rely on that army to defend the parts of Donetsk it's already captured or to coordinate assaults on regions of the oblast that Ukraine still holds. Pressure on Ukraine is relieved. Openings Ukraine could exploit in counterattacks develop. This attack was precise and clever because it may have just prevented Putin from achieving the goal his summer offensive had of taking Donetsk by the beginning of September. But it may go much deeper than that. As part of the summer offensive, Russia has already captured some key territory inside Donetsk. According to the New York Times on June 27th, that territory includes Shevchenko village, which is in western Donetsk. Why does that village matter? Well, just outside the settlement lies a lithium deposit that, though it only measures 100 acres, is seen as one of the most valuable in Ukraine. That deposit is concentrated and could yield massive amounts of lithium, which is used in modern electric batteries. That matters because it means Putin's Donetsk campaign is putting something vital at risk: the minerals deal the US and Ukraine signed back in late April. Under the terms of that deal, the US will create a special reconstruction investment fund through which it will encourage investors to pour money into Ukraine. That money will fund Ukraine's ability to exploit the massive mineral deposits it has, many of which are in Donetsk. 50% of the revenue Ukraine generates from this work will go back to the US, with the deal essentially serving as a security guarantee for Ukraine. After all, the US now has a vested interest in ensuring that Ukraine retains as many of its mineral deposits as possible. Putin puts that deal at risk with his Donetsk campaign. Perhaps it's no coincidence that Ukraine hit a Russian military headquarters in Donetsk just days after news broke of Russia claiming a key lithium field. Ukraine doesn't want its minerals deal with the US to collapse. The odds are that the Storm Shadow strike is just the first of what will likely be many in Donetsk, designed to scupper Putin's summer offensive and ensure Russia can't take all of the oblast. Again, it comes down to leverage. If Russia claims Donetsk, Ukraine loses access to the minerals that are keeping the US on its side. Without those minerals, the US might choose to renegotiate with Russia, which puts Ukraine in an even worse position. So taking out a Russian headquarters and one of its key commanders in Donetsk is the headline that's come out of the June 31st and July 1st strike. But what really matters is what Ukraine does next. It needs to stop Putin from taking control of Donetsk at all costs. Perhaps that means we're going to see far more Storm Shadow strikes in the future. If nothing else, what just happened in Donetsk is another shot that damages a Russian summer offensive that is already in the midst of collapsing. Find out about the many problems Putin is already having with that offensive in our video. And remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more videos covering Ukraine's latest attempts to keep Donetsk out of Putin's hands. And thank you, as always, for watching.